I feel like we had really good banter until we pressed the record button.
Yeah.
And it's like pressing the record button was the SD to not be funny anymore. Or do we have stage fright?
What's the MO here? Would the MO
Food. I really wanted to order DoorDash, but I know that if I do that, I'm going to be long-winded with my 4 pages of notes, and then DoorDash is going to get here while we're trying to record. So I was like,
go get it.
yeah, I couldn't do all of that.
All I think about is MO from grad school, like, all right, you see those golden arches. Okay. Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Courtney.
Join us as we delve into true crime, paranormal encounters, and all things spooky.
Grab your flashlight and get ready to wander into the darkness with us.
This is Wicked Wanderings.
Everyone to know I just face planted against the mic. I'm just going to get into it.
All right,
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Courtney.
So I've been wanting to do an episode. I wanted to do multiple episodes and bring them back local to us because I know that we've talked a lot about different places, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And it kind of has that factor of like, we haven't heard as much about it and probably our audience hasn't either. But I've realized that because I live where the dragons are, quote unquote, I might have some legends and things that people are not familiar with. And so I was kind of just thinking a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh my God, there was this place. What was it? I tried to look through my camera roll. I wish I could say I still had pictures, but it was from like a 2011 memory. I'm dating myself here. Today, I'm going to talk about the legend of Camp Wendigo.
I think we talked about this before where I was like, Windigo, isn't that like a type of beast? But I think
that's Wendigo.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you made that connection. So the legend of Camp Wendigo is one that I can remember hearing about all through middle and high school. It was kind of one of those places where people would go in groups of 2 or 3 or a carload of kids, and they would go and try to find the ghosts. And
where is this exactly?
It is in Windsor, Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you.
It's within the territory of Windsor State Forest currently now. It is a place for me that I have visited before, which I think is cool. I have my own story of being there, but I'm going to save that because I think that learning about the history is more important first. Like I said, it is in the Windsor, Massachusetts area. A lot of people are going to be like, where the hell is Windsor? You're going to need a map. I'm not even going to try to explain it. It's actually near what's called Windsor Jams, which is a small waterfall for those who might be more familiar with like hiking trails and waterfalls, or if you are familiar with the area. Sadly, the current status is that it was demolished in 2015. It was a decision that was made by the state. I'm assuming it was likely due to safety hazards because when I went during the summer of 2011, which was obviously a long time ago, the buildings were in a very rough condition. Mm. So I'm assuming that they just became so bad that it was like, someone's going to get hurt here. And there were obviously people going to go check it out because of all of the local talk it had about it. I'm finding, actually, when I was trying to do my like official research for this podcast, that you couldn't really find anything online. Even when you like specified down like Camp Wendigo in Windsor, Massachusetts, you'd still get a short paragraph and it would all be the same exact information. The history of the camp is that it was founded by Florence Ryder and Muriel Logan. They were 2 Smith College physical education professors.
Ooh, Smith College.
Yes.
Right out of NoHo.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of local to that area.
Yeah.
Not too far, but it's more pushed out towards the woods, obviously, where the dragons live.
Next to Peru, which I was looking at the map. I was like, I didn't even know there was a Peru in Massachusetts.
Yeah, very, 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 very tiny. I think a lot of the areas out there are very tiny, or they don't have like clear boundaries in one shape, if that makes sense. Like they're kind of like reaching around other areas. They had worked to create a warm, educational, non-competitive, natural haven in the woods. In 1942, after they purchased the farmland and the farmhouse that was on the farmland at the time. This camp was built on 75 acres of land, and it was previously farmland that belonged to John DeSelles. The farmhouse itself on the land actually dated back to 1790, which I thought was really cool.
That's cool.
And there was actually a plaque on the house that had said that.
That's cool.
So there was actually that kind of like history and the proof of it.
To speak to the historical nature of the land and the house, you said they tore it all down. Does that mean they had to tear down the historical house?
I believe so, yeah. I believe all of it
That's
had to
really
come down.
sad.
And it's sad, too, because, I mean, we'll get more into like where the land goes after it leaves this camp. But it really did just, it ended up in the state's hands, and it really did fall under quite duress. I mean,
Sad.
it was pretty rough when I went there. Some of the buildings were just like roofs caving in, furniture and things were still there, but it was definitely one of the more rough abandoned places that I had seen. During the operation of the camp, approximately 30 boys and girls would attend camp during the months of July and August.
So it's not a lot.
No, it was a small camp.
It wasn't an overnight.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, they stayed there. Yeah.
Oh.
They said that the people who owned it, too, they would often use it for like cross-country skiing and things out of season, but that the primary purpose of the camp was for boys and girls to go during July and August specifically. I feel like every camp has their thing that they're known for or their reason why people want to go. So theirs was that the children could learn hands-on farming and really spend that quality time outdoors and with the land. Often tasks like tending to animals, doing different things with planting. One camper had recalled that the campers would rotate, taking turns learning how to tend to the different animals at the farm, which I thought was kind of cool. So like one day you might have goats, then sheep. They also had pigs, horses, donkeys, ducks, chickens, rabbits, and then there were dogs and cats on the property as well. So they definitely had a lot to offer as far as skills.
Yeah.
And then the land also had a pond, a blueberry field, and an apple orchard on it as well. It's kind of almost interesting, like if you think about state hospitals and state schools, they kind of did that same model where they were a lot of them were trying to grow their own crops and raise their own chickens and things. It kind of reminded me a lot of that, and the timing of it was pretty similar too.
And focusing on trade stuff too. I mean, wouldn't you consider like farming a trade too? Like,
and very pertinent for that
skills.
area because we're not talking like a city area. Like that's probably one of the few jobs that most of the people who lived there had. Around 1971, it was purchased by the Latter-day Saints, and it became a camp for younger Mormon children, and it kept a similar feel. While it changed hands, and obviously the camp changed, it was still dedicated to like farming and learning those skills, which aligns with, I think, what a camp for Mormon children would look like for most people's expectations.
There's probably like a biblical aspect, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And it seems like there's not a ton of history available through the Historical Society specific to that time, which is interesting.
I should say Book of Mormon because they don't have the Bible, but sorry, just fact checking myself.
Right. It last hosted campers in the 1980s and since then had just become a local legend. Later, after the 1980s and after some time had gone by, it was deeded to the state of Massachusetts and it did become part of the Windsor State Forest, which is when it fell into disrepair. So there really wasn't anybody looking after the property. The story about the legend, which I know everyone's like, Courtney, you're burying the lead here, is kind of vague, for starters, I'll say. And there's some different variations kind of depending on who's telling you. I wrote down all of the gist of what it is.
Okay.
So the gist of it is that a camp counselor had a mental break and murdered several children at the camp.
Oh, God.
So most sources are going to say it was 6 young girls. In this story that's often told, it alleges that the counselor in a mental episode hung 3 girls in one of the barns.
Oh, God.
And drowned the other 3 girls in a tub before committing suicide herself.
Wow.
Some stories take this back further from the 1970s into the 1800s, which is minorly problematic for a few reasons. The town records can show that the land was actually a farm during that time, as we discussed. It would not yet be a camp, right, until the mid-20th century. Some people speculate, and one particular blog I was looking at was speculating that perhaps the confusion in the tale kind of comes back to typos, because 1980s and 1800s, you know, something with 8s and 0s, which I think makes sense. And really what I think is hard about this legend, and part of what captured me as a young woman who was obviously very creepy, I mean, I'm here, so and obviously there were signs that I was going to be this way, is that it was so vague. I can remember doing Google searches back then. Like when I heard it, you're like, okay, where's the proof? Where's the proof? How do I know? People were always going there, which takes me into the next part, which is that varying teams of ghost hunters have evaluated this site, finding some spooky evidence that could suggest a paranormal presence. Some different things that different parties have noticed: orbs and mysterious unexplained shadows have appeared in photographs. A child-sized handprint appeared inexplicably once on a window. Disembodied voices of children crying. And one psychic, this is where I'm skeptical, one psychic claimed to have made contact with the 6 children of the property. And all of that seems plausible when you're considering what the legend is, right? You're like, okay, orbs and mysterious shadows. Okay, if you're talking about people being murdered, especially children, that makes sense. A child-sized handprint would make sense. Children crying would make sense. But the problem is that when you dig back, the actual evidence to support any of this is none.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
Several town historians and other curious locals have explored the records with no actual evidence that any grisly crime ever took place at the camp, or really anywhere in that direct vicinity, for that matter. People have gone through police reports, they've gone through the town historian records and other official documents, and they can't find anything to support that even an instance like that occurred when it didn't have to do with someone dying. You know what I mean? Like, were there people who had an attempt at suicide where nobody could ever come up with anything?
Yeah. I just have so many thoughts going in my head from a lot of things that you said. Because one is that when you have lore, right, there's like this one little grain of truth and then it just like explodes, right?
Yep.
A second one is thinking about this whole psychic thing.
Yeah.
It brings me back to when we talked about Mary King's Close in Edinburgh, Scotland. And one psychic was like, oh my gosh, there's a little girl here and she lost her doll. So now everybody brings a doll to this one little room just because of what one psychic said. And I'm not discounting psychics in general, because I do think there are some people that just have like this extra like sixth sense that not all of us have. But 6 girls killed by a woman, it's just so
specific.
So specific.
And I really tried, because you know that I have my own, like, I want to believe a lot of when I read, like, a psychic said. And I do believe that people have the gift and they can get sensations and they can get these, like, vibes and things. But what was troubling for me is in my research, I could not find anything more specific. Like, to me, like, okay, if you made contact, right? I guess I don't, in psychic language, know exactly what that means. If you made contact, like, what did they say? What did they do? What were their names? Like, did you get any specific detail? And there was just nothing.
And there is also this thing with if there's a certain spot and everyone's talking about the same thing over and over again, right? And a lot of ghost hunters have proved this to be true, where there might be certain entities, if you want to call them demons or whatever, you keep putting into the universe, like, there was a boy, Bob, that died here by strangulation. And you keep putting that in here and you ask back, like, through EVPs or whatever, and you're gonna get, yes, my name is Bob and I died here by strangulation. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Well, like,
and if you think about, like, I have a lot of thoughts about that too, because obviously we've watched ghost shows together, and I know you're a little bit more into the ghost shows than I am.
I am. But like, I'm a weirdo.
My thing is, like, for everybody who's here and doesn't know us, I'm always the one who's like a little bit skeptical, where I'm like, yeah, I mean, but there's a whole camera crew following them. Yeah, absolutely. But like, we were watching one show. I'm not going to put the person on blast because I did enjoy their show, but they were like, did you hear that? They said blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I would not have gotten that at all if we weren't listening with subtitles on.
Absolutely, exactly. With the EVPs,
like, I heard
absolutely
something, but it sounded like to me, like it didn't. Like, I do think it's kind of like a placebo effect in science, right? Like, if you keep telling yourself you're taking that pill and you're telling yourself, I'm losing weight, I'm feeling better, I'm happier,
100%.
You can use the power of psychology to make yourself actually experience those things, and I think that some of that happens too.
And I will say also, just because I've watched so many ghost shows, now I won't. If they're like, oh, we're gonna play back the EVP, I won't even look at the subtitles. I'll just listen. And of course, some stuff gets distorted when you're watching it on television. But like, I'll be like, I heard this. And you're saying, like, if I heard the number 11, I'll be like, I heard 10. Because sometimes it is up to speculation of some sort. I try to listen to it as best I can, because did you hear they said devil? I'm like, yeah, they didn't say devil.
They make their own interpretations. And I also feel like, and what I was trying to articulate is that we deal with human behavior every day.
We do.
And a lot of people in some capacity engage in attention-seeking behavior. I've noticed this. I mean, I believe we all engage in behaviors to serve all of the functions. I don't think that it, like, I won't get into that. That's a whole ABA rap, which we can save for another day.
But also, I think the functions overlap too.
They do, 100%. But if you think about a spirit being trapped, and there's somebody here in a place where people are probably not normally, and they're paying attention, and let's assume that this spirit is attention driven, I can see why that they wouldn't, for any malicious reason, tell you, yeah, I'm Bob. I was strangled here.
Right.
Because one, I would imagine being trapped someplace for a very long time is very unentertaining. And two, you're bored. You're there and you're showing them some kind of compassion and some kind of attention. And I can see how maybe you might interact with that.
Yeah.
I wish I could find more about the psychic. There wasn't a name drop. There wasn't anything. I'm going to keep trying to look. That's all I could find on that part of it. While it remains highly, and I do highlight highly, unlikely that anything occurred of this type of murderous event, There are records in the area to support that during the late 1970s and early 1980s, several local girls did go missing and or were murdered.
Okay.
I'm going to bring up 3 names. I'm not going to dive into any of them today, but I have some plans for things in the future. The first one is Kim Benoit from North Adams. The second one is Cynthia Kryzik, I hope I pronounced that right, from Williamstown. And her body was found not far from Camp Wendigo, down an embankment in Windsor.
Oh.
So I thought that felt like it was important. I want to dig a little bit more into that. I just had to cut it off someplace so we didn't have a rambling 6-part episode again. And the third one, Lynn Burdick from Florida, Mass.
Wait, I'm sorry.
The timing of when
What?
Yeah, so it always comes back to Lynn Burdick with me. I know. I'm so sorry, but it's so true. And I didn't think about it until I was reading this one particular blog. I will give the link so we can put it in the show notes because he's done a lot of extensive research on this and it shows. And you can read some comments from other people too. He has it open so people can comment on their own experiences, which is cool. You're talking about a time between the 1970s and 80s. It would have had to have been when there were kids available there. So between 42 and 1980. And those 3 women from the area surrounding Windsor went missing and or were murdered.
So they didn't necessarily obviously go to the camp.
No, but they're within the area. And Cynthia in particular, she was from Williamstown, but she was found in Windsor. I just feel like it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Very interesting, and they might not be related at all. But I'm wondering if that played into the local lore is kind of why I brought it in. Because you're talking about
that grain of truth, right?
Well, and even just like it's fresh on people's mind. And this blogger did a beautiful job of explaining that if you were from the area during that time frame of the 1970s to the 1980s, and I say those 3 names, you remember that feeling or where you were when some of this happened. Is that playing into when all of a sudden these stories started coming up?
Yep.
Because it is 3, and the girls were 6 girls grouped into 2 groups of 3. You're right. There's always some nugget of truth. And this gentleman, again, in the blog, he goes back in and he talks about the lore of where did it come from and how there's a lot of lore about camps in particular. And they always seem to go down this rabbit hole of a camp counselor committed some kind of crime and murdered children, or a child murdered other children. And he had a lot of examples that were really well thought out too.
I find it interesting that, okay, the name 3, but the lore had 6. And then also it was a woman killer, which I also thought was interesting.
Allegedly, yeah.
Yeah. And you don't always hear about a woman killer. I know we've talked about
not unless she went crazy, which I didn't love. I mean, as I was like reframing my notes, Wanderers, I don't love the word crazy. I actually kind of loathe it. I know I'll say it sometimes for the sake of that's how somebody else describes something. Women do murderous things when they're quote unquote in a fit of crazy.
And also, what is
very
normal?
relevant.
You know what I mean? What's normal for a woman?
What's normal for anybody?
Well, I feel like a man can kind of like do his own thing and he's not considered crazy. All of a sudden we just decide to do something that's a little bit more independent and we're considered crazy.
A witch, a teat.
A witch. All right. A witch with a teat.
A witch with a teat. Some other kind of interesting facts that I found in the midst of my research that I was like, I got to make sure I bring this up, was that Windigo refers actually to a cannibalistic supernatural creature. And it references to darkness and fear. That's what that word actually...
And that's the one they picked for the camp?
So, and this is what I asked myself. I have literal questions in my notes. Did the camp creators intend to name the camp something so dark? Did they choose the name for another reason? Did it just sound cool? Unfortunately, with those things, like there is limited records from that time anyways, but that wouldn't be something that would be documented.
Is it the street name?
No. The history of the town of Windsor put out a bicentennial, and they offered another alternative possibility. And the entry stated that it was called Windigo.
And here I am quoting.
Because it is in the town of Windsor. The wind often blows there, and the place was originally known as the Windlow place, which is an Indian name. Windlow being Windlow, which is important because this blogger actually went to the cemetery and he's like, I checked the records. I couldn't find any Windlow people, like anybody who would be like Windlow place because they lived there. But there's lots of headstones in the cemetery that say Winslow. So he's like, it's kind of like putting a needle in a haystack on this one. There's no records. There's probably some truth in it someplace, but it's kind of one of those things that you think about and you're like down the rabbit hole before you even realize what's happening.
I feel like every camp, even back then, would have like a pamphlet. They'll say about us, like why?
But where would that have been stored in 1942?
Very true. Very true.
Inside a filing cabinet inside the camp. But then when the Latter-day Saints bought it, they'd be like, well, what is this? And throw it
we
away.
don't need it. Right.
And I'm sure it was frowned upon for whatever reason.
Probably. If it was a Native American name, which is cool.
Yeah.
Why change with the L and the G?
I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot about it that's super interesting. I did find in one of the town records a little pamphlet that had some statements from former campers that talked about their experience at the camp, which I thought was
very cool, very
really
important.
Cool. Right.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you 3 quotes that are 3 different people's perspective and memories that they have.
And here I am quoting.
I absolutely remember bathing in ice cold water once a week. I think there may have been some warm water to soap up with, but their reasoning was that we swam every day, which we did. The second one of my favorite spots was Blueberry Meadow, up a small knoll beyond the horse barns. I don't think I've ever been anywhere with such an endless amount of blueberries to pick, and then we made jam.
Oh, that's sweet. I like that.
Yeah, and then the last one, the camp was wonderful. Each child took turns caring for animals. I loved the goats and chickens. We also had 1 or 2 collie puppies that some lucky campers were allowed to take home at the end of the summer. There were bunnies by the archery field, and yes, the showers were frigid.
Oh, jeez.
But it sounds like overall, the camping...
It sounds like a camp.
Right. And the camping was positive.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to also note, because we're looking at something official from the town, they do talk about the legend and how they say, according to their record, that the legend took place in the 1980s, and they say the same thing, that a counselor at the camp murdered 6 little girls.
So if anything, it happened in the 80s.
Right.
Okay.
But they also state very bluntly after they say, never happened.
Because that's intense, right? If you're thinking like this is what happened, that's an intense
it's a big
killing
jump.
spree. Like
it's a really, really big jump. I hate that I always have the episodes that have no real end. I would love to know if anybody's ever heard of Camp Wendigo. I certainly find that when I was growing up, everybody knew about Camp Wendigo. I had gone to Camp Wendigo. But if somebody else
not
has
as a camper.
No.
Yes.
I went to Camp Wendigo in 2011.
You weren't even born yet.
Right. No, I visited in 2011, and there were still buildings standing at that point. I did go into them. It was a very off the beaten path kind of place. It did have like a weird vibe to it, but I don't think that's uncommon when you've already kind of told yourself going into it, all these horrific things happened here. And certainly that was something that the group of people I went with had been talking about days leading up and the whole ride there. My car actually, thank God my dad doesn't listen to this podcast. Shout out Papa Keating if you ever go back in your Keating. So when I had my first car, I was not even at the point where I could have like other people in the car with me.
What was your first car? I'm just curious.
It was a 1998 Mercury Mountaineer.
Ooh, okay.
So it was a bigger SUV vehicle. So I went with friends. I shouldn't have been driving people. By that point, I did not have the ability to do that. But I had this car full. Like, I had somebody in the passenger seat, 3 people in the back. Like, we were full, the 5 of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We went up there and we had like walked around the camp a little bit. And then there was a trail going up further that we wanted to see if there was anything further up. When we started up it, it was a very drivable path. So I started driving up it, and very quickly it turned to a very not drivable path. It turned to mud, and my car became stuck. We tried desperately to get it unstuck for probably hours. Now it's getting dark, and I remember walking back down to the camp to try to find a shovel. And I remember the very creepy feeling.
At the camp.
Yeah, I needed something. And I figured they had a barn, so maybe there's a shovel. I'm going down. I'm trying to find it. It's getting dark. I'm obviously very anxious in general because my car is stuck.
Right.
You have no service at Camp Wendigo, mind you. There's no cell reception.
I'm sure this road doesn't have any lights.
No.
So.
Nor would there be any people going up it unless there are people who are probably trying to do something bad.
Right.
We finally have to call 911 on satellite because we cannot get out of this place.
Wait, I'm sorry. You had satellite?
Well, you can make a 911 emergency call off satellite.
Oh, okay. I guess this wasn't. Okay.
Hannah's being very blonde right now.
Yeah, I am.
So we have to call 911 off satellite, and we have to get a tow truck company to come in. They're like, we could fine you for destroying this road. I'm like, sir, what road? This is not a road. They had to tow my car backwards because there wasn't even enough room to spin it around a mile out of the woods. Okay. Very expensive tow bill.
Courtney.
Very expensive tow bill. I got my car keys taken for it, but I will never forget Camp Wendigo because of that experience. And it was definitely a very weird time to have had there. That when I'm thinking back, like logically in my logical brain, should I have driven my car off the path? No. Why did we get stuck there? Because it wasn't muddy, and then it was. Very weird. So as I was kind of like going through this blog and I'm thinking about my own story, I'm reading some of the anonymous comments by other people who have gone there. There's just a lot of comments. So I'll read you a few of them to end us off. This one is an anonymous.
And here I am quoting.
And it says, I was up there today. Beautiful, beautiful land. I went there before reading any of the it's haunted info, so I had a very clear mind. Despite its overall beauty, it did give me the chills. When I was walking back towards the back barns and buildings, I stopped and turned around twice because I heard someone walking directly behind me as I walked.
Ooh.
I thought my dog got out of the car somehow and was just trotting up behind me, but nothing. I went to the barn across the street, but didn't feel comfortable going in. These incidents drove me to research the place, only to find that it's rumored to be haunted. I did go to the cemetery first. Maybe someone followed me back to the house. I don't know. It was weird.
And with the cemetery, it just has the people that passed from the town, right?
I would imagine so, yeah.
Okay.
Another anonymous one. Camped out that way in the summer of 2004. I was with a fairly large group of folks who decided against better judgment to walk in the dark around the camp. Nothing creepy per se, outside of hearing what sounded like horses galloping. Which is interesting because it used to be a farm. So we're talking, even if there is something, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be from...
Absolutely. The land can hold a lot. Absolutely.
Right. Another person who does have their name up, but I'm not going to repeat it just because I don't know if that person would be comfortable. And I can't get in touch with them to see if they can consent to being named. They said, I lived there with my dad in the 80s. I personally never saw anything, but at night, I would sleep facing the wall. I always felt as if someone was standing behind me. My brother told me years later that a little girl always ran into my room at night. Went back a few times, always made me sad how fallen apart that it had become. And I will leave you with a very, very long one that had my attention. Unknown. This person didn't go by anonymous. They went by unknown, which I thought was even creepier. Because like anonymous is like, hey, I'm here. Unknown is like, you don't know who you are.
Right. Are you human?
I worked for the Savoy Mountain State Forest as a lifeguard from 1997 to 2000.
Okay.
The Blair Witch Project came out sometime when I worked there, and a bunch of fellow workers and friends wanted to make a kind of spoof on the movie.
By the way, have you seen the Blair Witch?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I'm sorry. This is a little off, whatever, but I saw it, and I don't know if it's because, like, I'm guessing if you saw it when it came out, not knowing that it was fake, you'd be scared. Because Rob's like, I watched it when you did not know if it was real or fake. And I'm watching it, I'm like, this isn't scary. So, like, okay.
They must have thought that it was, though. I'm
sure. Yeah.
Well, our supervisor at the time, who still works for the state, so I won't mention their name, told us about Windigo and how he was present when the lady that lived there hung herself and they had to remove her from the ceiling.
Ooh.
So we got permission to go up there and film the place. OMG, what happened to us was insane. I never ever believed in ghosts until that night. Not only did we see the little girl like other people mentioned in the comments, but what just creeped me out is that when we were in the basement, an older man in overalls and a hat knocked and peeked in the window just as two of our flashlights and video cameras shut off. Then we hear footsteps crunch in the gravel right between me and my friend as he got shoved out of the way. We both ran as fast as we could, holding on to each other all the way up the stairs back onto the kitchen of the house. We also had a dog with us another night, and the dog started staring at and growling at the door to the big green barn. The door opened up over 2 feet on its own, and we thought maybe it was just the wind, but when we watched the video later that night, 3 or 4 balls of light, orbs I guess people call them, come out of the door just as it opened, and none of us saw that until we saw the video. One more thing that night. As we were driving away from the main White House, we all saw a bluish glowing light coming from the center window upstairs. None of us had any idea what it was, but when we turned around the car to take another look, it wasn't glowing anymore. We decided to call it a night. Well, we went back up later that week and wanted to investigate that window and room where we saw the light, and to our amazement, there was an old TV just below the window. OMG. So people will say, well, maybe someone turned it on. Impossible. The electricity to that house had been disconnected many, many years prior.
Oh, geez.
Which we didn't know until later. We thought there was still electricity in the house. Why, you ask? Well, because on video, one of my friends flipped the light switch to the basement and the light bulb at the bottom of the stairs came on. We called the electric company to verify what was going on, and they did indeed verify there was no electricity going to the house.
That's creepy.
Every line had been physically disconnected, as well as the service being shut off. I have a lot more unbelievable stories about Windigo if anyone wants to know. We did a ton of research about it and know people that can verify the information that is not in the wonderfully written article above. Like the fact that 2 children did go missing that lived there. One of them was found in the pond behind the cemetery. It sounds like the word of mouth information about kids dying and people missing has been mixed up and modified like the game of telephone. But if anyone wants to hear some of the verified stories of misfortune that took place there, feel free to email me at some of the terrible accidents were not really reported or put in the newspaper and were kept very quiet.
Well, shit. Are you going to email the address?
I'm going to. And I also have one more that I want to read. I actually lied. I had
no,
one more
go ahead.
thought. So one more. Jump scare. In the 1980s, after the camp became state property, a groundskeeper lived in the house the drownings are said to have taken place in. My mom was there with some of her friends visiting the guy who worked there. What he told them is the murders is why the camp was closed and the tub remained in there. When I was in middle school, we took a field trip to Windsor Jams, the waterfalls I was mentioning. One of the teacher's aides worked there too, so he had to close up the barn or something, and us kids were near the house. Many of us saw a figure inside the house on the second floor. I believe the shutters slammed shut too. After the noise, the guy came running around the corner far too fast for him to have been inside.
I mean, you just can't discount all of these people's experiences.
What do you think? Should I email the guy?
I think you should.
Should I email him from the podcast
I
email?
definitely think you should. Absolutely. And what do we have to lose?
We're going to email him, guys.
Yeah,
So that's what
why
we're going
not?
to do this time. We're going to email him, and I'm going to tell him that
Because
we did an episode.
it's on Reddit, correct?
No, it's on Mysterious Hills Blogspot, which is the blog that the guy...
How long ago was the post?
It just says 10:33 p.m. They don't put the dates.
Okay. I mean, what do we have to lose, right?
It could be like years ago.
But like, if they don't respond, they don't respond.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
we get something, cool, we'll put it out there.
Maybe he'll even want to come on the podcast.
Exactly. What do we have to lose? Let's
Maybe
do
he'll
it.
be a complete weirdo. We don't know.
Exactly.
We're gonna try it out.
We
Though. I'm
just
not gonna say
won't
their
give our
name.
address.
Their email does give their full name, but I'm not gonna say it on
Okay.
the air unless they want us to redact it.
No,
but
I think that's a great idea. Let's
I
do it.
will keep everybody posted. And if anyone's heard of Camp Wendigo or has thoughts about Camp Wendigo, let us know. You can send us an Instagram message, you can send us a Facebook message, or you can text us if the anonymous thing is more your style.
Should we do a card?
I have so many feelings about the cards, but yes, I'll do pick a card, any card.
All right. So this one is the Nine of Diamonds. Tiffany Lomax. On Wednesday, July 2nd, 2008, at approximately 2:37 a.m., the victim was shot in the area of 199 River Street in Mattapan. Yeah. If you have any information about this case, please call 1-855-MA-SOLVE. Mattapan. Mattapan. I've never...
I'll have to look that up later.
But anyways, Tiffany Lomax. That's just... It's just...
I'm so sad.
God.
I'm so sad. I hate ending this way. We got to
know.
figure something else out.
Courtney, that was awesome. That was fun.
It was something, and I really
Yeah.
hope that we're gonna email him and we're gonna see what comes
see what
of it.
happens.
We're gonna see. We always like to do the due diligence of getting all the information and scoping it out for you guys.
I love it. Thank you, Courtney, so much.
Thanks, Hannah, for listening to me. Yeah.
Always.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Wanderers. Thanks for listening today. Wicked Wanderings is hosted by me, Hannah.
And co-hosted by me, Courtney.
And it's produced by Rob Fitzpatrick.
Music by Sasha N.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave a rating and review, and be sure to follow on all socials. You can find the links down in the show notes. If you're looking for some really cozy t-shirts or hoodies, head over to the merch store. Thank you for being a part of the Wicked Wanderings community. We appreciate every one of you. Stay curious, keep exploring,
And always remember to keep on wandering.
A sincere expression of gratitude to our esteemed patrons for their generous monthly contributions. You too can become a valued patron and unlock a realm of exclusive content by supporting our mission for as little as $3 a month. Your contributions sustain our commitment to delivering high-quality content. Visit wickedwanderingspodcast.com and click on the support tab to join the ranks of our dedicated patrons. Thank you for considering this opportunity to deepen your engagement with Wicked Wanderings. Your support is paramount in enabling us to continue our journey into the realms of mystery and true crime.